Today is the last meeting.
Today's
Yes,
your last meeting, yeah.
All right, we're live on YouTube.
Do you have Lynn on audio?
Yep, we
Oh,
hear you,
good.
Mr. Larson.
Okay.
So Lynn, is that red whale flag, is that part of your sailboat that's behind it with a big spinnaker flying?
The interesting thing about that sailboat with the big spinnaker flying, the name of the boat is Climax. The keel fell off of Climax in subsequent years to when we raced it on the Victoria to Maui race in 1988. And so that boat lives no more, but it's got many, many fond memories of I'm actually in that picture as one of the crew on the race when we
How
took
long
it
a
to
boat?
Hawaii.
How big a boat? How many feet?
55 feet.
And you went from Seattle to Maui?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many days did it take you?
Oh, that trip was, I think, 11 days and 8 hours, 9 hours, something like that. It was pretty, that was our fastest race that I've raced.
And how big a crew did you have?
We had a crew of 8.
8?
Yeah.
4 on, 4 off?
Except for a dog watch around dinner hour that we had a 2-hour shift watch routine. I was the cook and the medical officer on the boat. And so the cook got special privileges. I got to choose which watch I wanted, and I got to also have one fewer watch than everybody else.
Good evening.
Good evening, Miss Connie Coleman-Lack.
Good evening.
We're gonna get started here. We'll call the order to the Planning Commission this December 1st, 2021. If Ms. Spear could call roll, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Mr. Daniels,
Here.
Mr. Pearson,
Here.
Mr. Combs,
Present.
Mr. Wagaman,
Present.
Mr. Larson,
Present?
and Ms. Coleman-Lackady.
Present.
Who are we missing?
Parsons.
Parsons.
Thank you. I'm sorry. And he's excused. My apologies. No, he's not. He's here.
Yeah, he's here. Oh, you got a tough roll. So
Ms. Devereaux will be back next meeting. Sorry.
no problem. It's all good.
We do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
It's been a long year, right? Okay, before us, we have the minutes of November 17th, 2021. I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
Mr.
Second.
Wagaman made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion, changes, questions? Hearing or seeing none at this time. All those in favor by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the minutes passed as written. Thank you. Any changes to our agenda tonight? Ms. Spear?
Sorry, no, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before us, we'll have the public comment. And at this time, anyone wishing to speak to fellow commissioners on any subject, I would recommend, if you're here on the call tonight for public hearing, I request that you wait until that time, but at any time here on any other subject, public comments are available. So I'll open up the public comment. Please keep your comments to limit to 3 minutes if you could. Thank you. Anyone online to speak to us tonight under public comment?
Mr. Chair, there's one person with the last name of Dunlop with their hand up, but I don't know if they're here for the public hearing or for general public comment.
Okay,
So
Dunlop, are you, see your hand up? Are you unmuted?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, this is for public comment, sorry.
Yep. Are you waiting for a public hearing?
Public, wait, hold on one second. Public hearing, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much. So anyone else wishing to speak under public comments?
If there's anyone else from the attendees who wish to speak for public comment, please raise your hand. And Mr. Chair, I don't see anyone raising their hand, so I think that these folks are here for the public hearing.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So at this time, we'll close the public comment period. Thank you. So next on our agenda is the public hearing and on the Gravely Lake Gardens proposed development agreement. Ms. Spear, do we have a introduction to?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair, and Ramon Rodriguez and Courtney Burnell from the Community and Economic Development Department, will be leading the discussion today prior to the public hearing. So I'll turn it over to either one of them, whoever wants to speak.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I am Ramon Rodriguez, the Associate Planner at the City and the project lead for the proposal we are here to discuss tonight. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to decide Gravely Lake Townhomes LLC's proposal to utilize the Housing Incentive Program. Under the Housing Incentive Program, the applicant is requesting a density bonus of 4 dwelling units and a parking reduction of 3 parking stalls. In advance of tonight's public hearing, the Commission has received several public comments in opposition to the project. I would like to take some time to address some of the public comments. This hearing specifically to review the applicant's request to utilize the city's housing incentive program. With the exception of the requested 4 dwelling unit density bonus and 3 parking stall reduction, the project is allowed outright within the zoning district. Denial of the applicant's request to utilize the city's housing incentive program will not deny the applicant's ability to build a 32 dwelling unit multifamily development and provide the required parking and on-site infrastructure. In public comments submitted for this hearing, claims have been made that staff did not appropriately follow the city's ordinance for the site SEPA notice of application. Staff published the notice of application in the News Tribune, mailed it to neighboring property owners, and posted it on site as directed per the city's municipal code. The city has provided a declaration to certify that the notice of application was posted on site. The associated SEPA threshold determination has been issued and the determination was not appealed. In the public comments submitted for this hearing, claims have been made that the design review should have expired. The city is currently working on transitioning to a new permitting software program. The current software is not user-friendly, and the new permitting software will help with those concerns. In regard to the design review application, the applicant has received a completeness letter and 2 correction letters. The city has provided project documentation when requested. The new permitting software will help with any transparency concerns. This concludes our presentation.
Great. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ms. Spear.
I'm probably anticipated you. I was just going to say, if that is the conclusion of the staff report, then Mr. Chair, we're ready for the public hearing.
Okay, great. So we will open up the public hearing tonight on the Gravely Lake Gardens proposed development agreement. If anyone wishing to provide testimony to the commissioners, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And as Mr. Rodriguez mentioned, I will say this proposal and this public hearing is related to the housing, the residential density regarding the additional 4 units, and also the parking reduction of the -3 parking stalls. So that's what this public hearing is about. And I'll open it up to anyone wishing to have a public comment, a public hearing under this Gravely Lake Gardens proposal. So anyone wishing to speak, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first one will be Mr. Dunlop. I'm sorry if I say this wrong. Titchamir Dunlop.
Yes, Mr. Dunlop.
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Dunlop, go right ahead.
Sure. My name is Tihomir Dunlop, and tonight I'm reading a public comment on behalf of Judith Minnetti. to members of the Lakewood Planning Council. As a longtime Lakewood taxpayer, I object to this application for the Housing Incentive Program. Unbelievably, this project proposes to destroy yet more of Lakewood's heritage Gary oak trees and would therefore negatively impact the environment we all share here. Such proposals should not be taken into consideration and should certainly not be supported with incentives funded with our taxes. Lakewood City authorities need to revise the existing priorities for land use projects to include proper regard for preservation of the Gary oak trees, which contribute so many desirable benefits to our environment. Trees may not be the most important consideration in the development of land, but they should be among the things at the top of the list. They are not receiving the proper attention necessary to preserve them for the future. The overwhelming realization of the impact of climate change on the world means you must now focus on the need to preserve and foster the living natural environment in which we exist. This situation requires intelligent forethought and planning. We rely on local governments to serve the needs of the people in order to live in clean and healthy neighborhoods. Trees' natural functions contribute to the environment by securing the natural habitat for wildlife, carbon sequestration, generation of pure oxygen, extending shade canopies to shield us from the scorching sun, and providing their wonderful umbrella of green beauty for all of us to appreciate and enjoy. Please do not leave open the possibility of regret for having neglected a huge responsibility to provide a healthy and attractive environment for future generations of people who will make their home in Lakewood. It is wise for authorities to choose a positive course of action for the preservation of the wooded environment from which our community presently benefits. Sincerely, Judith Minnetti. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. And I will mention that this has nothing to do with the tree preservation that we're addressing tonight. So any other further comments, please hold them on that tree preservation. This commission has no authority in this matter whatsoever. So I reiterate that this strictly is a public hearing regarding the density of the residential properties to add 4 units, and also the minus of the 3 parking is what's requested. So those are what the public hearing is about. So any other comments regarding tree preservations, if you could please hold those for another time at this time. So I thank you. And Ms. Spear, do we have someone else?
Yes, Christina Minnetti.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, great. Good evening. So I'd like to request that you deny the request you received to utilize the housing incentive public funds for this proposal, which would put 2 apartment buildings on Gravy Lake Drive. The developer's request for incentives should be denied for the following reasons. One is the deficient public notice. I also received the statement from Mr. Rodriguez signed electronically sometime in July that the sign did go up in January, but 3 neighbors at least, or 4 neighbors, my friend, we all go up and down that road multiple times a week because we renovate houses and we're going to the hardware store, and there was no sign there. Because as you can imagine, we're on the lookout for signs on properties with Gary oaks, and there was no sign there. The sign that went up in early summer was not weathered. I have pictures to show it. The hole was not weathered. The pile of dirt was not weathered. That stuff was not there. It didn't fall down, and there was no sign there. And we've seen this happen elsewhere. It was improperly posted at the 123rd Street project. They restarted it. They admitted it was nailed on a tree at the end of the road. And I'm saying that you have to make sure these developers post it properly and don't try to cover it up, because we saw that there was nothing there. It had an expired permit. Of course, maybe you might have a new system, but that doesn't change the fact that at the moment, it says it's expired. This is not transparent. Ms. Brunel couldn't find it according to the address. I could only find it eventually by the number. She couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. It's not transparent. You can't find this stuff in the permit portal. This makes a lack of public trust in this project, and this is a reason why it should be denied also. The question of low-income housing aim is also questionable. They added 4 units that are supposed to be very low income into a kind of regular complex, as I understand it. How do we know that they're going to guarantee that this is going to be very low income for 20 years, as I understand it's supposed to be, right? Maybe it's affordable to build, but is it going to be affordable to occupy from eco, perspective? Like, how about, energy? Is it going to be on the top floor? You're going to lose all your heat through the ceiling? Did they, put enough insulation? And finally, there is the question of environmental degradation. Now, I know that it doesn't have to do with trees, but no public funds from the pockets of hardworking Lakewood taxpayers should go to support the wanton destruction of Lakewood's environment, including these trees. Do not allow the environment of Lakewood to fall victim to developers whose main interest is their own profit. The people of Lakewood deserve better than this. And I want you to make sure that everybody puts those signs up, that the limit is not 100 feet as you have it of informing the public, but 300 feet as in most jurisdictions, or at least many, as other city planners have told me. I think you need to do more work to inform the people of what's going on in the city so they know well in advance and not 5 months after the public comment period is over. So thank you for your serious consideration of these important factors, and may you make decisions that ensure an environmentally sound, aesthetically and urbanistically pleasing city to live in as Lakewood continues to grow. Thanks a lot for your time this evening. I really super appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Minnetti. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we now have, Christopher Huss.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Huss.
thank you. My name is Christopher Huss, and I'm the attorney for Gravely Lake Gardens, the developer, and Claude Remy, its owner. My comments are going to be very brief. I simply ask the commission to recommend to the city council approval of the development agreement that has been submitted. My client is and always has been a proponent and strong advocate of affordable housing in the city of Lakewood. He believes that the proposal meets all of the criteria set forth in Lakewood Municipal Code 18A.90.050, and if approved, will provide 4 very low income housing units to the city. I will stay on board and am available to answer any questions that might arise during the public hearing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Huss. Appreciate it.
And now, Mr. Chair, we have James Dunlop.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
My name is James Dunlop, and I'm a resident of Lakewood. I'm going to read out a shortened letter by Thomas Mitchell with his permission. The full letter was submitted as a written comment, and I'm not going to question, whether or not this is appropriate, his comments for this hearing. My name is Thomas Mitchell, and I'm a Lakewood resident. Nearly a year ago, I found out that developers were planning to put up a 3-story building directly east of the condo in which I live. At the time, I made a public comment in which I explained how the building would degrade the quality of my life. I bought my condo because I love its location next to the Gary Oaks. I love how the sun comes through my window in the morning and I can see the calm, protecting oaks. I spent most of my life in Southern California, and having sunshine has always been essential to my psychological health. I spent my career working for the government, and I decided to retire to Lakewood. I thought it was a great city which respects its natural heritage. I bought my condo because of the location and the pleasant surroundings. The oak trees give me a sense of belonging and well-being. I've made improvements to my property since moving in, and life was looking good. But now a 3-story building is going to destroy my quality of life and undermine my psychological health. I feel let down by the city of Lakewood. I thought the city cared about its residents and its environment. I also understand that most of the Gary Oaks I see in the morning are to be cut down to make way for development. I thought those trees were protected, but now I find that the protections are weak or non-existent. I feel betrayed by the city of Lakewood. I am now in my late 60s. I thought I would be spending the rest of my life in my condo, enjoying the sun and trees. My first letter came to nothing, but I'm asking you once again, stop the development as the proposal now stands. It will damage Lakewood and it will undermine my psychological health. Yours sincerely, Thomas Mitchell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlap.
And now we have Kyle Jollyboy.
Yes.
Good evening, council. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. I grew up out in Lakewood. And you know what Lakewood means, right? The woods part. Do you know what the woods part means? They concern the Gary Oaks. And you guys are now cutting them all down. Upon knowing what I know now about the city of Lakewood, I want to share. My father was a businessman out in Lakewood for 30 years before his death. And he never wanted Lakewood to become a city. He passed in 1991. You guys became a city in 96. And I think my father had foresight in what was going to happen. And it's happening now. Trees are being cut down left and right without respect to their age or to what they mean to the people of Lakewood. And you guys are putting up huge warehouses where people used to roam. And you want to just give a little plaque to Chief Leshai that was killed. We have to respect the land. This is the land that we're on to protect for our children. I still go out to Lakewood a lot to care for my 88-year-old mother. And I see those oaks every day. Every time I'm there, I mean. You know, there was a time when I grew up, we had a place in Lakewood called Villa Plaza. And if people don't know what Villa Plaza was, it was an area where they decided to put a mall on that failed. Lakewood is, you guys need to listen to the citizens. I hear the citizens' cries every time I'm at one of your meetings, and I've been to them. And I just don't understand why you don't listen to us. Is it because we're not giving you anything like money or promises? Because I wonder how you guys would really think of this, what's going on with these trees in Lakewood, if you guys weren't council members. Because you're supposed to be the voices of Lakewood.
Mr. Chair, the time has expired.
Has it? I didn't see it. I'm sorry. I do apologize. I did not see a timer on the screen. So
Can you just wrap up your final comments?
Yes, I yield my time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Jolbo. Appreciate it. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, from Mr. McCarthy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Christina again, but I'm reading on behalf of Matthew McCarthy, who's not in Lakewood today. So he writes, to whom it may concern, I wish to be a party of record for the proposed development that we're talking about tonight and would like to file an official complaint regarding the developer's failure to properly post the public notice in January 2021. There was no posting of notification for the proposed project until after the comment period had passed. The comment period ended on January 26th and the board went up in early summer. I go by this piece of land at least 3 times a week. One day I noticed a new sign had been posted. When I read it, I noticed that it was about yet another proposed development, but that the comment period had passed. Moreover, there was also an error in the notice which stated that the comment period was 12 January 2020 to 26 January 2021. There is no way that this new sign with crisp documents went through the winter. It was a similar situation with the improperly posted public notice at the 123rd Street proposed speculative warehouse site. Given the situation, the public comment period should be restarted as it was restarted at the property at 123rd Street Southwest. In addition, I am generally opposed to the development on Gravelly Lake Drive because it will adversely affect the quality of life and environmental and economic health of the city of Lakewood. There is a need to preserve our unique oak woodland and trees. We do not yet need another building project that has short-term gains for the developers at the expense of our community. Lakewood has become a museum of bad urban planning. People should visit Lakewood for an example of what not to do to a community. This must stop. Please don't allow this to continue. Future generations will rightly blame the city for mismanagement of our environment. Thank you for your prompt attention to this pressing matter. Sincerely, Matthew McCarthy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And unless there's anyone else that would like to now raise their hand in order to speak on the hearing, I think that's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll give it just a minute.
There's one phone number at 8551. Does this person wish to testify? And
No hands.
looks like they're not responding. So I think that's all of those that wish to testify, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is the 6021, is that Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hearing or seeing no other persons wanting to speak on this public hearing at this time, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time for all comments, and we appreciate everyone's comments tonight. We'll take every one of those in consideration. So now we move to number 7 on our agenda tonight, the continuation of the discussion on our 5-year energy and climate change implementation plan. And I think that goes to Mr. Buer.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Commissioners, this has been before you on several occasions now, and the attempt has been to try to whittle down an appropriate number of actionable items into some form of a 5-year plan. There was discussion on a 2-year plan, and what I have before you this evening is a recommendation for a 3-year plan. There have been some additions to the list, and I would like to go through that list.
Okay.
Tiffany, would you mind sharing your screen?
Certainly. Here we.
And the list that you have before you is a bit of a compilation of all the comments that I have listened to from the commission on climate change and what we should and shouldn't be doing. And also it includes some minor changes in language to address specific issues. And so with that in mind, as you can see, this was originally written on November 22nd and was revised this evening with the addition of 2 other action items that are already in place to some degree. The new actions incorporate an environmental justice assessment into the climate change action plan. This was a big topic with the city council when they adopted it. And if you look closely at the plan, there's quite a few environmental justice action items that were originally listed. The question becomes, do we do the environmental justice assessment with each specific action plan or upon the entire 3-year plan? So that remains a question, but that is one of the important topics that is a part of this proposal. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Number 2, annually prepare a comprehensive greenhouse gas emissions inventory and forecast. Since we're now using Google Earth and Google Explorer and environmental services, we now are able to actually track annual emissions for 2019, 2020, and 2021. And in annual reports that will be submitted to the commission and council later, you will begin to see the information. So that one's actually a pretty simple one to accomplish. We're putting it into a basic format, and it's something that we can easily update from year to year. Along with the use of the Google data, we'll be also using ICLIC information. We are a member, and they have a very sophisticated forecasting program, and we're going to use their forecasting program to check it against Google's. So that's going to happen a little later in the year once the city has hired its climate change officer. Number 3 is probably the most difficult, establish emissions reduction targets. The reason I say that is because the city of Lakewood doesn't own any utilities. And so it makes it very hard for the city to make assessments on reductions in those areas. And so we end up having to see if we can work around that by some other means. That too is discussed a little bit later in this document through regional efforts, as well as working with existing energy companies to see if we can better utilize their existing programs and perhaps adopt new programs that are specific to Lakewood's needs. That too, I will get into a little bit later. Number 4, if you look carefully at the climate change proposal, it actually has communications, several parts. And so I basically divided it up into 4 things. 1, establish a climate change website to develop and implement a community education, engagement, and activation guide. There are some wonderful websites out there that do this. That is something I think that the public, if it were able to use and operate, we could start making some changes and doing it at a local level and doing it in a positive way. That will be something that we will talk a little bit more about as far as budget. 4B, amend to revise the current strategic plan that will help guide and forecast city resources and program initiatives. The city manager is really hot on strategic plans and drives me nuts. However, I've already started the process of incorporating some generalized climate change action programs into the strategic plan. That's going to be before the city council in January of 2022. And in the event that the council takes action on this document a little early, also in 2022, we will immediately update the strategic plan. C is just a general statement, inform businesses, city council, commission, staff, and other stakeholders of the city's emission reduction targets and overall progress. And then lastly, provide monitoring and implementation reports, add targets and progress to the Lakewood dashboard. And this gets right back to the emissions inventory and forecasting, and item number 3, establishing reduction targets. 5, this is a big one. Proactively work with energy providers, Puget Sound, Lakeview Light and Power, and City of Tacoma Power to market existing energy conservation programs with Lakewood property owners. Where appropriate, propose new programs to better fit Lakewood's needs. Complement energy provider conservation programs with grants or low-interest loans using HUD and/or ARPA funding. With the ARPA funding and some of the other things that are coming forward, you may very well see some funds available for property owners to begin implementing energy conservation programs on apartment complexes. And if they take advantage of these, it has the net effect of also addressing environmental justice issues by reducing potential costs for paying for water, sewer, et cetera. Number 5, a part of that too is if you're going to receive these awards and make sufficient upgrades and improvements into your property, that doesn't mean that you have the opportunity to raise rents as a result. So there's a piece of that that goes together. And right now, that's something that we will need to address at a later date. Another big one, 6, work with Pierce County and Pierce County municipalities to develop a regional approach to address climate change. Strategies include adoption of revised climate change Pierce County-wide planning policies, and consider an interlocal agreement with surrounding cities to share best practices and implement regional programs to help residents and businesses meet regional demand reduction targets. Number 5 and 6 are probably some of the more proactive ways the city is going to be able to reduce emission reduction targets. Because again, we don't own any utilities, and the real problem is vehicles. And I am not
proposing that we address the vehicle issue as a part of this action plan. That's something that is much bigger than the city of Lakewood. And I think we're better off staying with those things that we think we can do. Number 7, update the city's non-motorized transportation plan. Everyone agrees that this needs to be done. And there are some items that are listed there: identify gaps, updates the city's street design standards, and so forth. And if we go a little further, evaluate bicycle sharing programs and evaluate the feasibility of reducing the number and width of travel lanes, et cetera. In the past, the city had funded it for $50,000, but it's not near enough. It really needs to be about $100,000. So when this gets to the city council, I'm going to be asking, what's the priority here? Because if it's a priority, then we should begin to be looking at this in 2022 and 2023. If we have an updated transportation plan, I'm also of the opinion that it will help us get grants to do some of the pedestrian improvements that have been outlined here in this document. The other thing, if you haven't noticed it, you're beginning to see more and more electric bikes in Lakewood. And they're not riding in the street, they're riding on the sidewalks. I think that trend is going to continue. So when we talk about future pedestrian capacity, particularly around high schools and the like, a 6-foot sidewalk is probably not appropriate. You're going to be looking at a different type of sidewalk or some sort of reduction in lanes to begin to address electric bicycles. I do see that as something that's coming about faster than I anticipated. Pursue grant funding to plan and construct missing pedestrian bicycle connections between major destinations. That's kind of related to the non-motorized transportation plan, and it's also not. I kept it separate. 9, develop plans for key commercial corridors in the city to guide redevelopment of these areas into mixed-use, pedestrian, and transit-oriented corridors and nodes. Then I listed possible locations. The city manager and I have had discussions about where do we go after sub-area plans. And keep in mind, when we talk about this stuff, we're talking 20 years into the future. So the stuff that we're putting in place today will be the stuff that you and I will probably not be around to see. But these corridor plans that could be very helpful in maybe addressing some of our housing needs into the future. Anyway, that's another planning exercise for another date. 10, update existing mixed use and infill development incentives. This is something that we need to take a look at. You talked about it a little bit this evening with the request for a density bonus for low income housing. That came about as a result of the city council adopting changes in zoning in the Woodbrook neighborhood to industrial, which resulted in a lawsuit, which resulted in the city winning, then losing, and then coming to an agreement. And that agreement was this density bonus process that you heard before this evening. It needs to be updated. That's one area that we need to take a look at. We do not do development impact fees. Is that something that we want to continue to support? Is no impact fees. Tax benefits, and the other one is tax increment financing, which was recently established by the state of Washington, and the city is proposing to use it in the Lakewood Station District as a part of a large mixed-use and residential project. Promote and encourage green development standards in both public and private development and operations. And believe it or not, we're having some conversations with LASA, the purpose of which is when they do new construction, they're looking around 35 units per acre, seeing if they're interested in going with programs and the like that exceed basic energy requirements, and in addition, begin the discussion of using the roof itself for a garden. So there's some general interest in that. Number 13 is new. Use a supplemental greenhouse gas and climate change impact worksheet of climate change impacts and potential mitigation when conducting the environmental review process under State Environmental Policy Act. This is a bit of a push. The WACs need to be amended in order to be able to do this. That's something that's underway. It's not quite ready yet, but I do see that climate change worksheets are going to be something that we will be using at some future date. Review and as appropriate, update the city's hazard mitigation plan to address climate change. More will be talked about that under another section. 15, review and as appropriate, update the municipal code on environmental protections. And this has to do with geologic hazard areas, flood hazard areas, critical lands, and natural resources to include tree preservation, which the City Council has agreed to move forward with an amendment to the code in 2022. Develop an urban forest management plan. This is something that our Parks Department would love to see. And number 16 is necessary if you want to do 17. Hire a consultant to explore ways in which the city and property owners can monetize carbon capture and storage. Actions already underway. We established a climate change chapter to the comp plan. We're in the process of revising the city's tree preservation code. We regularly update our sub-area plans. We enforce our uniform plumbing code for low flow appliances and fixtures. We also enforce the building codes specific to electric vehicle and charging infrastructure. And that code section also includes ADA parking. Number 8, encourage use of drought tolerant native vegetation. That's kind of what our current code says, but there will be a question that maybe at some future date, rather than encourage, require. So that's something that we will want to take a look at. 9, enforce current code regulations that require non-motorized facilities to install and maintain secured bicycle facilities. Support the creation of a South Tacoma Way bus rapid transit system that connects downtown Tacoma, Lakewood, and Joint Base Lewis-McChord. That discussion continues, and the city manager's office is much involved with Pierce Transit. 11, reduce City Hall footprint from 3 floors to 2 floors. That's going to happen in the next couple of years. Continue to support neighborhood events such as cleanup and recycling events. Examine ways in which we can reduce paper consumption, and we're right in the middle of a document management information system that would do just that. Every 2 years, or as otherwise dictated by Washington, update Title V of the building codes as it relates to hazards resulting from climate change. And then 15 is something that will get on here pretty soon in December, mid-December. Develop a citywide climate change risk and resilience public perception study. And that goes back to item number 1 under the proposed projects. The new ones, and I forgot to add this one, is the Clover Creek floodplain engineering alternatives analysis. Several years ago, the city updated its floodplain regulations, and we were surprised to see that there were potential 100-year floodplain problems in Springbrook, where before there had never been analyzed. So we began to do our own work, and we initiated some additional studies at $50,000 and realized that what the federal government had provided was inaccurate, and that the situation was much more extensive and severe than people recognized. So that's been reported to the city council. So we're now in the process of performing an update. And I think that process will be completed, I think in 2022 by our Public Works and Engineering Department. And the last item is a long-term project beyond 3-year action plan timeline. Lakewood, as a member of the South Sound Military Communities Partnership, advocate at both the state and federal levels improvements to the I-5 Nisqually corridor. These improvements, which are estimated at $4 billion, would restore impaired ecosystems and mitigate the flood risk to I-5 in future flood events. If you haven't had the opportunity, the News Tribune did a wonderful editorial on this today, and there are 3 stories pending on the impacts that that bridge in its current condition has not only upon traffic, but also upon declining fish populations in the Nisqually Delta and in the Puget Sound.
Mr. Buer, just to let the Planning Commission know, I have those and I'll send that information to you today.
So that's my bit, if you want to call it that, on what a 3-year action plan would look like. That may not be in alignment with what the Planning Commission desires, but it's a starting point for discussion. And so that's what tonight's meeting is about. And Mr. Daniels, I'll return it back to you and other commission members for comment.
Good. I appreciate it, Mr. Buer, for your information provided. Is any comment to Mr. Buer on what he presented to us tonight? Does anyone have any? Mr. Larson?
Evening. A couple of ways we can clean this up just a little bit. I think in number 3, if we change the word targets to policies, it would give us something to actually do and put in place. And then in paragraph 4, C is or should be a part of A. I think you can consolidate those two because the website function would include the information to the city residents and businesses, et cetera. And so that just gets those folds together. I had then a question about vehicles and the policy for, forget what number it is, but the policy where we're trying to figure out what to do in terms of vehicle emissions in the city, and we're a bit dumbfounded by lack of alternatives or stuff. And I'm just wondering if there's some contributory policy way that we could encourage citizens to bring solutions to the table or make a scholastic game out of it between the schools. And it would serve to bring public awareness to the factor. And who knows, a couple of nice solutions just might come out of it. And so that was a thought I had. And then last, or second to last, actually, I want to talk about Clover Creek. The licensing of e-bikes, is it maybe that's something that we need to have, is an electric bike set of regulations or policies, because if they become a problem by taking over sidewalk space or going too fast or something that really requires some education on part of a rider that is different from regular bicycles, because those electric bikes do go faster, and they go faster easier, and they're quicker off the line. We've ridden them, my wife and I, and we really like them. And I think that's a thing of the future, and I think it's coming pretty fast. So maybe some attention is spent in that regard. The last part is when I saw is with regard to Clover Creek. When the federal government came out and regulated the Springbrook area and showed that it was a flood hazard area, I was dumbfounded, because I've only lived in Lakewood about 60 years now, but that area has, and I live on Clover Creek now, but down farther by Clover Park High School area. So I just didn't quite believe that area was a floodplain. And I wonder, Mr. Buer, if we have questioned the validity of the federal government's perspective that is a flood hazard area.
Yes.
And
we actually started doing some initial studies and determined that it was that based upon the information that we're receiving, the situation was much worse. We were going to go ahead and apply for a request to have it amended. But after reviewing the initial studies and analyses, it was concluded that it would be worse for the city to pursue it. And so we dropped it and instead have chosen to go this route and doing our own professional studies and seeing if we can come together with some solutions rather than having the federal government do it for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments for Mr. Buer? Yes, Mr. Buer.
Lynn made the comment about the school districts and using, climate change as a process to address education and the like. There is actually a whole variety of school projects that teachers can use to begin to address climate change. And one that was quite interesting, I'll put it to you that way, was the children went out and measured how many vehicles were idling while the parents were waiting to pick them up, and then determined how much greenhouse gases were being emitted, and then submitted that report to the school board. And in turn, the parents decided that they needed to knock off the process. So that's how you can do this, I think, in a more positive spin rather than just, let's just do more regulation. There's also some other things that you could do with buses that also have, some school districts have no idling programs. I'm not sure that the school district is ready to talk about that yet. I have not approached them. And I was also looking at what things that we can do over the next 3 years, recognizing that as we go through this, we'll probably making changes to it as we accomplish certain specific programs. So I thought I'd share that as information.
Thank you. Any other, Mr. Wegeman, unmute yourself. Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, if we stop idling at schools, how about drive-through restaurants and drive-through coffee shops? Are we going to stop doing that? Are we going to have them park? So then that drives up our parking requirements. So I don't know.
Yeah, Mr. Buer.
Some cities outlaw drive-up windows altogether.
Yeah.
One city in California, I believe it's Petaluma, California, no longer allows gas stations. So there's
Petaluma just keeps shooting itself in the foot. It's been doing it for years.
I'm trying to find a balance here of what is appropriate for this community.
I'm good with that.
No,
go ahead, Mr. Wegeman.
Yeah, and then going back to I always struggle with some of the definitions when we say environmental justice. I don't know what that means. I think I know what justice means, but environmental justice. I mean, with some of the comments we've heard tonight, does that mean we can never cut down a tree, or do we only pull out noxious weeds and everything else can grow? I mean, it starts getting really hard here when we start doing those things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but the question is how do we have that communication with the citizens of our community, and make this thing work?
It's a good question. I would also point out, if you want to begin to look in that a little bit further, go to the State Department of Health map disparity system. And then they take a look at a whole variety of environmental issues and then compare it to specific neighborhoods throughout the entire state. And it's very clear that certain neighborhoods have not been well represented when it comes to a whole variety of environmental issues. Mm-hmm. This came out with the work on the tree preservation code, because there are very specific neighborhoods that have significant lack of tree canopies. So that will be one of the issues that the tree preservation code is going to be taking a look at. How do we change that? And really, that's a pretty good example of environmental justice in play. The maps are updated on a regular basis. I encourage the commission members to take a look at it. It's a bit of an eye opener, on a lot of areas, and it shows that the Lakeview neighborhood along Pacific Highway, Springbrook, Tillicum, and Woodbrook have significantly higher environmental problems than other parts of Lakewood. So when we start taking a look at programs and projects right now, what we do is, for example, when the city council adopted its transportation management plan recently, the public works director actually used the Department of Health disparities mapping and shared with them what areas were needing improvements and then built the improvements, the proposed 5-year plan around those neighborhoods. So
Can you
that's a
send
good
us that
example.
link? Could you send us that Department of Health link?
Yes.
We
Great.
can provide that to you, sir.
Yeah, any other comments from fellow commissioners? No, seeing none at this time. Okay, Mr. Buer, so I appreciate this update. What's next to follow up just on that subject? What's
Okay.
next on our?
Okay,
Fine.
well, if there's no objection, I'll take the comments that have been, that I have received tonight and any further ones.
Mhm.
And then we'll schedule a public hearing in January.
Okay.
And then
Yep.
after,
No, go ahead. Mr. Combs.
I was just going to make comment, since we're including those, that there was a question on target versus policy. And I liked Lynn's suggestion to create something tangible that you're working for. The challenge, I think, here is, not having a specific way of measuring it yet. So I think, maybe that's something you can just chew on, Mr. Buer, and figure out if there's another word that works that isn't creating a policy that is defining something that you can't define yet, but still is something better than a target.
Or
I know that's a
recommendation,
hard
maybe?
one.
Recommendation, maybe?
Yeah.
I think this is going to evolve over time as we end up doing more annual reports.
Mhm.
And we begin to see how we're able or not able to address some of the issues with building gas emissions. The other one that's a big one is natural gas.
Mhm.
Some cities have been discussing going straight to electrification, but in Lakewood, that would be a substantial investment and would probably increase costs. So that's why it's not included. But I believe that PSC has had some discussion about doing some other approaches on addressing greenhouse gases. So that's going to follow up with further conversation.
Mr. Larson.
Quick comment back on the idling subject that just occurred to me. And I don't know, Mr. Buer, if we have the ability in the city of Lakewood to provide a monetary reward program. But seems to me as though cars could be equipped with ignition systems that turn the car off and start it back up automatically in conjunction with the brake pedal and the car stopping. And modern cars have those. And I'm thinking about whether that same feature could be rewarded in the populace by paying them back, or give a $200 allowance to somebody who would come in and say, I just made my car more emissions resistant. And I just wonder whether the city has or could have some kind of a program like that.
I'm not sure right now. If the next federal award comes through, much of what we're talking about, there will probably be additional grants as it pertains to energy conservation. And so we'll take a look at that in some detail when it's available.
Yep. Mr. Wagaman, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I'm having a senior moment right at the moment, Don.
All right. Anyone else have any comments? Seeing none, when you think about it, we'll go ahead.
I remembered now. Listening to the public comments tonight and then reading some of the ones that were sent to us via email and letter.
Hey, Mr. Wagaman, just one moment. Is just topic, and let's finish up with Mr. Buer's document that he had next on our agenda is going back to that proposal. We're going to talk. So if you could.
But I think
Okay.
There's some overlap here is what I'm trying to point out.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
all right,
I just
go
want to give the basis for that. We're part of the Growth Management Act, and Growth Management Act says local communities have to start taking up some of the population so that we can save the open spaces, so we can save forests and those kind of things. So that's the premise behind the Growth Management Act, at least the way I understand it. And so ultimately, as our population increases, we're going to lose some open spaces in our local communities because we want to preserve those at Mount Rainier or wherever darn place it is. And so as a state, as a country, we have to look at that. So what it means is we as local communities end up having to suck it up by putting houses vertical because we don't have enough space to put single dwelling units in. So we build apartments or condominiums. And so we're in kind of a dilemma. So that part of our task, as I see it, is a transparency and communication with our citizens so that they understand that, you know, we are supporting the Growth Management Act because we want to save the Mount Rainiers. And that means we're gonna have to suck it up here in the local community.
Yeah. Mr. Buer?
There has been some discussion at the council level on this very topic. Seems to be a desire at the state level to adopt residential zoning that's the same for all cities. And so everyone gets higher density in single family zones. And Mr. Boki in particular has been pretty adamant that that could have some potential and drastic changes in existing well-established neighborhoods. One way of addressing that is to come forward with development standards for that type of development. For example, have design review for duplexes and apartments and things like that. Right now, we do not have design review in the R1, R2, R3, and R4 zones. But that may very well become a work plan item in the near future. So it's something that is being studied, and I would just draw it to your attention. The same issues are popping up at council.
Yep. Great. Any other comments then on this subject? Thank you, Mr. Buer, for your presentation as always. Next on the unfinished business is the action on the proposed Gravelly Lake Gardens development agreement. So Mr. or Tiffany, do you have that? We have a couple documents looking for or questions. Does anyone have any questions before we take any actions?
If I could, Mr. Chair, I would just bring back Courtney Burnell and or Ramon Rodriguez in case they have anything they wanted to provide to you before your discussion.
Okay, great. So either one, Ms. Burnell or Mr. Rodriguez, do you have any comments? Seeing none.
I guess not. So Mr. Chair, it's back to you.
Okay, so I have a question is if I could.
Hi, this is Ramon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we sure can. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Did you have any?
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Did you have any other comments?
I do. And Tiffany, would you please share the exhibit that was provided for today's meeting?
Give me just a second. So go ahead and speak while I get it up.
Sure. So the Planning Commission is being requested to take action on Gravelly Lake Gardens development agreement to utilize the city's housing incentive program. Approval of this agreement would allow for 4 dwelling unit density bonus and a 3 parking stall reduction. Aside from the density bonus and the associated parking, the project is allowed outright within the zoning district. Denial of the applicant's request to utilize the city's housing incentive program will not deny the applicant the ability to build a 32 dwelling unit multifamily development. The housing incentive program is a program that enables the developers to build above the base density in exchange for affordable housing. The developer does not receive any compensation or funding from the city of Lakewood. The property is encumbered via a covenant, which is the reason for review by the Planning Commission and attaching your packet for 20 years. So the property would be encumbered by a covenant for 20 years of the duration of that property. The project is in compliance with the Lakewood Municipal Code. Staff recommends approval to utilize the city's housing incentive program. This This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Great. Any fellow commissioners have a question or comment? See, Mr. Larson?
Mr. Rodriguez, is there with this 20-year bond, if you will, that requires the mix to have low-income housing units made available in the community? Is there a report that they have to do every year or 2 or 5 that demonstrates that they are within the parameters of their code requirement?
Yes, so our multifamily safety program would have the ability to audit them to make sure they're in compliance with their agreement.
Well, it seems to me that we shouldn't have to have us do extra work in order to accommodate them. That if we could require that there be a system to report that, then we wouldn't have to go out and enforce an ordinance in order to double check it.
Mr. Viewer had I think in regarding to that.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the commission's making a recommendation this evening. And then the recommendation is going to be forwarded to the city council, and the city council either approves or denies the request. So I want to be very clear on that. The second thing is that development agreement is tough. And it has a whole series of topics. You cannot sell the property unless the city council of the city approves the new owner. There are also annual reports that are required. And in the event that you close out a unit and you hire and you rent somebody else, you have to show that that person is low income. And there's requirements that you check for the number of people and annual requirements on employment and amount of money they're making. And yes, it's a requirement that the city is having to do. And we're currently doing it with multifamily tax exemption. So I just see it as just another piece of the whole housing puzzle that we are currently using the general fund to pay for. I don't see a way around this at this point in time.
Good, Mr. Pearson.
Yeah, Dave answered and talked about what I was.
Yep. Okay, great. Mr. Wagaman.
So a follow on to that discussion then is how do we, okay, so we'll do some testing. What are the teeth in it? If they fail to do that, what happens?
I'd have to go back and take a look at the agreement. Give me a few minutes, please.
No problem.
Okay.
That's all right.
Then I'll go with I had another question that I really want to talk about. And this is for Mr. Rodriguez. Several people have commented in this public comment that we may or may not have followed the procedures for letting people know in the community. Could you help me think or clarify that a little bit? Did we or did we not? And if we did not, how are we going to make up for that?
Sure. So the process in question was for the project SEPA threshold determination, which had a public comment period from January 12th to the 26th. I personally posted that notice on site on January 11th. I also signed an affidavit that I did so. Fortunately, I did not take a picture of that posting, but I checked out a city vehicle, posted that notice board not only on that site, there's an additional site for the same applicant over on Lakewood Drive for Meadow Park that I posted on the same day on January 11th. And in fact, that the notice board was on site from January 11th until past the summer. It was never taken down. So it was there for a long time. And we did receive public comment from a neighbor, Thomas Mitchell, within that time frame. I believe that comment was received on the 22nd. So it was within the comment period.
Okay, I appreciate it. One question, Mr. Rodriguez, could you just also state, there's been several comments regarding public funds. Can you just reiterate again your comment regarding public funds used on this project?
Yes, so there'd be no public funds used on this project. The request is for to exceed the base density in exchange for affordable housing. Exceed the base density and a reduction in 3 parking stalls. So exceed the base density by 4 units and reduce the required parking by 3 parking stalls.
And then follow-up question on those parking stalls. It was mentioned that there's an adjacent properties that if there was a overflow or needed additional, there's a additional parking on adjacent lot that could be utilized. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's all the questions I had. Any other follow-up, Mr. Buer? Oh, sorry, Connie, I'll get you right after. Go ahead, Mr. Buer.
There are enforcement provisions found on page 17 of 94. Basically, the short answer is the city sues the property owner and seeks damages. Those damages would be a monetary amount, and we would probably estimate the amount of affordable housing criteria, if you will, and ask for a number, and then place that into some sort of a fund to help others build affordable housing in the city of Lakewood. So it also gives the city access to examine and inspect all documents and records. So he has to turn them over in the event that we do have a default. This is pretty significant. It's not something that you would want to do. And so I bring that to your attention.
Thank you. Ms. Connie Coleman-Lackady.
Yes, I was wondering in the end of this resolution that we're recommending to the city, it says 4 additional extremely low income units. What's extremely low income?
So Tiffany, can you share the exhibit that was proposed or provided for not the it was the memo that was created. I provided a chart with the.
Can someone give me a page number?
5.
Excellent.
So here?
So yes. So extremely low is 30% of the family median income, and so it varies per family size. So those are the numbers.
Yeah, so someone making X amount of dollars, one family size, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Correct.
This is the 30% of that median income, and those are the thresholds that would be used, and that would change probably year after year. Those numbers would possibly change.
Yes, they do change every year. This is Dave Buer. These numbers are also the same numbers we use for our CDBG and HUD programs. The same numbers that the county uses, city of Tacoma, et cetera. Well, I'll say for Lakewood, these are the numbers Lakewood uses based upon the income levels in the community. So excuse me.
Great. Connie, does that answer the question?
Yes, so these units, you can have only one person. I mean, a single person can take one of these units?
That's a possibility, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other follow-up, Mr. Wagaman?
I'm taking the other side of Connie's question. It said 8 people. Are these, do they have, how many bedrooms in there to get 8 people, or is it just going to be a bunk room?
No, there are minimum requirements under the building code. The city of Lakewood would not allow 8 people, for example, in a 2-bedroom unit. So you'd have to have an X number of units to make that happen. So it kind of, and those are the numbers that are provided. Those are the ones that we use.
Okay.
Yep, Mr. Combs.
I think Brian was, or Mr. Parsons was ahead of me. If you want to go, Brian, or is that okay, Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead right now, Mr. Combs, I guess, while you're on there, and I'll go back to Mr.
All right.
Parsons.
Hey, well, so you guys, our issue is not with the trees. And our only issue at hand is really, do we have a recommendation for the city council? And I'm not trying to oversimplify this, but that's it. And so to me, I recommend that we do approve this, that we give them the additional, it's a very small ask, 4 units on a 32 unit project. This is in an area that's already zoned for this. It's already approved for everything. To me, there's not a lot of extra questions on this. They're receiving no extra funding. They're receiving no extra favors. This is something that we as a city are asked to do, get more housing, and we got an opportunity to get it and get it on a project that's already got multifamily. What a win. And then you get extreme low income in there. The reason I like that is because what you really want in affordable housing is diversity. And if you don't have economic diversity, if all this was an extremely affordable housing or extremely low income building, I would have concern with it. But it has mixed incomes, which is very, very desirable for cities like ourselves, for every city. If you have one that's really high or really low in income, you have either an economic blight or an issue there, or you have economic disparity because no one can afford it. This is the best of all the world. So I don't see really any negatives on this. The tree stuff aside, I love all of the comments with the trees, but unfortunately that's not our bailiwick here. So I guess I would just put my recommendation that we give it to the city council and say, this is a very good thing. And this is something that helps our city. And this is something that most cities would be eager to get.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. And before we take that motion as well, if that's it, but I'll go to Mr. Parsons.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Combs. I appreciate that. I agree with the mixing of incomes. I think that really is important to get that in there. So I do appreciate that. One clarification I just had was just for my own piece. Are these low income housing units, will these be rentals during that entire period, or would they be sold off to a lower income provider at some point in time?
Yes, Mr. Viewer.
In the event that the property were to sell, the city would have to approve the owner. In the event that the property were to be converted into condominiums, the city of Lakewood would have to approve the condominium conversion. And I would also go so far as to say you can't place all 4 low-income units in one little section of the building. You have to disperse them throughout, and you have to make sure that what they are provided is the same type of unit that everybody else is getting in the property. So all those things are addressed in the deed restriction.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you.
So I see no other, Mr. Larson.
If Mr. Coombs' recommendation is a motion, I would second the motion.
Great. Was that, Mr. Combs, just to clarify, was that a motion to recommend to pass this to our city council on?
It's a motion to pass this to city council.
Great, on approval, correct?
With approval.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. And Mr. Larson, second.
Chair Daniel, you have a question by Mr. Wegeman.
I know, I see him right there. No problem, Mr. Wegeman.
I'm encouraged.
Oh, you're muted, Mr. Wegeman.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
I was encouraged by Mr. Combs's comments. However, if you read some of the books, if you read Thomas Sowell, you know, the economist, he said diversity doesn't work. And so it's an experiment that we're trying. And you don't think so?
I know so. I've managed these properties and developed them. I know this works, and I've read all of Thomas Sowell books, and I think he would be very encouraged by this project.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I think that's good discussion to have. I appreciate your insight.
Good. So we do have a first and a second. Any further discussion, comments? Hearing or seeing none for recommendation of approval to City Council on this Gravelly Lake Gardens Development Agreement. All those in favor by saying aye.
I,
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, this passes our recommendations by the Planning Commission. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion. Let's see, we go to new business, introduction of the tree preservation code. Sorry.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn this over to Mr. Buer, but some of the discussion this evening obviously has dealt with this issue.
Yes.
The documents that you have been provided was a report that was given to the city council on what our current code says and some areas that could need improvement. I won't go through it all,
Yeah.
but you can read it at your leisure, and you can see what works and probably what needs to be improved. That being said, December 6th, the city council will be looking at two subjects. One is the formation of an ad hoc tree preservation committee. So they will be discussing its formation, what it would look like, and the application process and getting into the details. So that's on the agenda for the 6th. The other topic is, does the city council wish to move forward with a moratorium on tree preservation or tree removal? And what would that look like? So they have been provided a legal analysis. That should be available on Friday. And the third report is one written by myself, which talks about interim regulations, what would work, and some of the pitfalls associated with interim regulations. And I'm sure that they're going to have a very big discussion on both of those three topics. I will tell you that what makes it difficult for the staff to talk about interim regulations is the council's not articulated in any way what they would look like. And so when we talk about interim regulations, where do we go with this? And my comment to them is you need to simplify it for the public. And if you make it too complex, you're going to create just more problems. So, and if we're talking about no net loss and single family residential zones, you're affecting thousands, literally thousands of property owners. Is that something you want to do with interim regulations? I asked the question. It's up to them to provide the answers and direction. So more to follow on this, but we plan to start with, once they decided to form the committee, they'll review applications, they'll have meetings, and hopefully that we'll start this off in January. Courtney Burnell is the project lead on this, and she will take it on. And why, I don't know. The most difficult projects are adult entertainment, sign code, tree preservation, and the fourth one is pets and animal regulation.
Right.
So those seem to draw out the most impassioned topics, and so more to follow on this. But the goal, frankly, is to bring this back to the City Planning Commission late May, late May or sometime in June. So the turnaround time is pretty fast. And expect a very rigorous public hearing.
Good. All right. I appreciate it. So we do move to reports. Any reports from staff?
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, no meeting on December 15th. So this is your final meeting for this year. And then the first meeting of 2022 will be on January 5th. And I won't go into agenda topics because so much of it has already been discussed this evening, but next year we'll start with like the annual housing report, comprehensive plan amendment topics, as we're talking about energy and climate change. And then we'll be getting into springtime with shoreline master program update and also then the tree preservation. So other than that, back to you.
The one thing I would point out is that we may go back to regular meetings come in January.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
If that does take place, I would like to invite Connie to come back and receive a resolution from the Planning Commission for her service.
Great. Yeah, no question about it. And I thank you. And any other comments or reports from fellow commissioners? Miss Connie?
I would just like to say thank you, Mr. Buer. It's been a pleasure working with you all these years when Planning Advisory Committee and then the Planning Commission and with Mr. Daniels. I think the three of us are the only ones that have always been together.
Yeah.
So thank you so very much, and I appreciate anybody listening to me when I do add something, but and thank you, Tiffany, for all your support over the years. So anyway, thank you, and you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Yes, and thank you, Ms.
Same to you.
Connie. I appreciate it. And on behalf of myself and the fellow commissioners and past commissioners that have served on this nice voluntary board for all these years, it's been a pleasure. You've been a bright light of our, fellow commissioners. For some reason, not a lot of females sign up to join this commission, and it's a shame because you do add a different perspective sometimes, and so we urge anyone out there in your endeavors, which you're out there in a lot of other projects and a lot of other facilities and doing other things. You might mention to any of your fellow female individuals at Lakewood residents that, hey, there's always an opportunity to apply to come on to this, commission. I think it's rewarding, and I thank you again for all your service.
Well, I will definitely be doing that. I'll be beating the drums. The neighborhoods for the next couple of weeks and see what I can get going.
You got it. Thank you again so much. Any other, Mr. Larson?
Quick question, Mr. Buer. If we go to regular in-person meetings, will there be a virtual alternative? We've got quite a bit of travel planned for next year, but wherever I am, I'll probably be mobile and connected. And I just wondered whether that was an alternative or how you envision that playing out.
I don't see that being a problem. I've seen council members do that before when we were having regular meetings. We just need to make arrangements in advance.
Yeah, can do that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So it looks like, that will, in February, I probably have, might be missing a couple meetings in February, but we'll definitely let you know the dates, and I'll send that in so you guys are aware of that. And then the council will have some opportunity to appoint actually in replacement of Ms. Connie Coleman-Lackady. And then I think Mr. Combs and Mr. Larson, I think you reapplied. I'm not sure if you did, but I hope you did for all your efforts. So hearing or seeing no other, yes, Mr. Wagaman.
Do we have an assignment in following up with what we've been doing for Mr. Buer?
Nope. No assignment tonight. Have a great holiday season, and you're all off until January 5th. So we appreciate it. And thanks again, Ms. Spear, Ms. Burnell, Mr. Rodriguez, for all your assistance and help. And like I said, everyone have a great holiday time, and we'll see you next year.